There's this narrative around the gaming community regarding people who like old games more than the new. It's been slowly making its way to me in my content as well. Why aren't you playing the new God of Wars instead of the old ones? Why aren't you doing this no merchant run in the remake of Resident Evil 4 rather than the original? How dare you prefer DMC 3 over DMC 5? 5 has literally 50 things at once. You're blinded with nostalgia if you prefer God of War 3 over God of War Ragnarok. This is a topic I felt I needed to discuss just so that people hopefully understand all the hype around the old games I play. There are reasons why I constantly stream and make content for these games from the PS2 and PS3 era. It's not just because I grew up with them, we'll get to that in a second. It's because they're mechanically gamier than the games that come out nowadays. But that last sentence doesn't mean it goes for every game. Resident Evil 4 Remake is as gamey as games can game. Elden Ring that came out recently is also a gamey ass game, no complaints here. It's just that the old games are better for me for mechanical and gameplay reasons, game design. I make that clear every day on every stream with both my gameplay that is happening on the screen and with words that go through one ear and come out the other ear for some folk. You can't just say that that's all nostalgia. No one can pretend to like a game more than the other for this damn long. It's not pretentious, it's legit. This is one I can perfectly touch on with Devil May Cry 3. This is a good example to talk about since I didn't grow up with the game. I never played it. I never knew it even existed back when I was a kid and got into PS2 gaming in late 2010. Yet when I say I prefer it over Devil May Cry 5, people get the wrong idea. It's fair to think like that since not everybody dives deep into game mechanics and challenge runs like I or any other challenge runner does. It's fair, I see that. I really don't feel like explaining why I prefer this over that since it just becomes a tedious job of me getting the footage for both games and just an instant video for you to skip and not watch to understand my point, but I'll still go through the struggle. I'm not asking anyone to sit through one of my streams, but I legitimately explain why I prefer a game over another. There's a lot of layers and depth into the arguments I bring. It's not as simple as, yo, the attacks in Devil May Cry 3 are so satisfying to land. DMC 5 sucks. Which gets me to my next point. If I prefer an old game over a new one, that doesn't suddenly make the new game bad. I prefer God of War 3 over God of War Ragnarok, but God of War Ragnarok as a full package is a complete game filled with content and all that. A great game. I prefer the original Resident Evil 4 over the new one, but that doesn't mean the remake sucks. It's just about gameplay and the consistency of the combat and how snappy it is in the original Resident Evil 4 that I like more than the remake. The remake is a phenomenal game. This especially hurts me for the God of War side of that argument. After uploading around 500 videos throughout the life of my channel, constantly talking about the old God of War games and their combat, some people still have the brain cell to call that nostalgia. This is what I mean when I say it's weird. No one can pretend for that long that they enjoy a game. I'm not simply making TikTok edits for God of War 2 or some shit, some badass American Psycho edits. I'm constantly talking about the combat, the game design, the encounters, the bosses, the in-depth mechanics, the flaws, the replayability, the challenges, and the consistency in the combat of these games. And I do that for every game just to make things clear. Yet when I critique God of War 4 and Ragnarok for not being a God of War game, people think I'm saying they're bad games and I'm just nostalgic for the old glory days of God of War. One more time, they're not God of War games for me. Slap any name into this and swap the character model of Kratos, you would not mistake it for a God of War game. Gameplay wise. Don't tell me, bro, can't you see this is a continuation of the Greek games? No, I'm talking game design and game structure. This is not God of War. Now, people might think I hate the new games, but I just don't see them as God of War. I like God of War Ragnarok, but it's a game that I like. It's not a God of War game that I like. I wasn't and never have been nostalgic about anything in my videos where I talk about combat and my favorite games. I purely tell you to your face that this is how this thing works and this is why I like it very much. Devil May Cry 3 allows me to manage the enemies devil triggering on me, allows me to ride enemies like skateboards for isolation strats, allows me to access Dante Must Die mode from a fresh save. All the enemies are complex, unique, and are purely designed to be fought by Dante, has a different mission structure that has the weapons and the inability to switch styles in mind, and overall has a better DT than Devil May Cry 5's DT. Devil May Cry 5 does not have that. It has millions of other stuff, but it does not have what DMC 3 has, and that's all how I feel, by the way. You can prefer any game you want. Devil May Cry 5 does millions of things right, but not better than DMC3 for the reasons I stated above, and for some other reasons that are irrelevant for our conversation right now. Art style, story, weapons, etc. I should let you know that I'm leaving out a lot more stuff, like the enemy step being available without the need to buy it in DMC3, but this is not a comparison video. This is a video that tells you it's not just nostalgia. In my case, it's not nostalgic at all. I get that some people are nostalgic about stuff, but it's not for me. Being nostalgic about a thing for me is a good story, a nice movie that you saw back in the day, or something that you want to revisit to get that nostalgia feeling and all that. Games? They're games. They get better depending on how I get better. Games are not like movies. They are miles better for me since they are more layered than a movie and they require interactability. Some of my favorite movies were made in the 90s. Now, if I go and rewatch them, is that nostalgia? No. The film is just good. Games, they're always the same. There are cases where you thought a game was bad but you gave it another try, but that's about where that stands. Sometimes you let go of a certain disease called stubbornness and finally load up and enjoy a game that you've been hating on every chance you get on YouTube comments and Twitter threads. That's different. Games are multi-layered pieces of media. No game ever ages. I know that phrase gets thrown around a lot, but not a single game ages. Every game plays the same way it played the first day it came out. Again, I'm talking gameplay here. I don't care if you think sound design or graphics are outdated. I'm talking gameplay. A game plays the same. And if you're ever gonna be planning to change that, then you're changing way too much than what the original was. A story changes in a lot of ways depending on where you are in life. You watch SpongeBob as a kid and laugh for the silliness. You grow up and watch it, you laugh more for the silliness, but from a different perspective. You watch it as a kid and you are SpongeBob at that point. You grow up and watch it, you're suddenly Squidward tentacle hentai. Now games stay the same and play the same. The only difference depends on you. There is such thing as nostalgia for a gameplay of a game you used to play, and that does open up possibilities for you to play them forever, but that doesn't always happen. I didn't grow up with DMC, yet now I have Devil May Cry 3 as my 4th favorite game of all time. Is that nostalgia? I replay the old God of War games to death every single day, especially the trilogy, especially God of War 3. Is that nostalgia? For what? Nostalgia for what exactly? Am I playing with full audio on and getting immersed with the story? Am I studying the story infinitely? Or maybe I am just nostalgic and trying to revisit these areas and bosses that I've been fighting for nearly a decade? No! That is the simplest thing I can say. Just no. You can't pretend to like something for that long. It's not nostalgia and it's never going to be that. Explain this to me. As a kid, the game I played the most all the damn time I had a PS2 was God of War 2. Now I want you to kindly explain to me why I prefer God of War 1 over it. A game that came out 2 years before it and a game I never played as much as God of War 2 as a kid. God of War 2 improved on a lot of stuff that God of War 1 did. But go ahead. I just asked you to explain it to me, but that was a setup question because I don't need you to explain it to me. I can. The thing with me is that I constantly explain why I like a game's mechanic more than the other games next to it. I never go, I don't know what it is, but I like X more than Y. I give you the reasoning in full detail every time a certain thing gets brought up. God of War 1 has Orion's Harpoon redirection, a lot of ring out spots, the most open encounters, the most unique and complex encounters, some of the best blaze moveset, a lot of platforming and combat behind every corner. God of War 2 either doesn't have these or has them but way less than what God of War 1 gives. And there's your reasoning. The nostalgia sphere can be even replaced with experience, but that never affects me to this day. When I say God of War 3 is my favorite God of War game and my favorite game of all time, it's more than just me trying my hardest to get to play it as a kid and the whole zesty arc of trying to play the game. That's a whole different story that I shared in this video. It is way more than the struggle I had to go through at the time to get the game. It all gets back to mechanics and generally gameplay stuff. God of War 3 has the combat grapple, the soul summon, encounters that I find the best in all games, has the best movement and options for movement, the fucking bow of Apollo, the best balance, access to secondary weapons all at once, one of the best resource managing God of War, some of the best enemies, some of the best sections, some of the best bosses, some of the best moveset in the blaze, some of the best encounters, some of the best platforming, and some of the best fucking full package ever as a game. Have you ever noticed me pick a game over another purely because of the story? No, and you bet your ass I can always explain why I like something very much or why I prefer X over Y. The replayability I get from these games is purely the perfectionist mindset. Constantly doing challenge runs, vanilla runs, possibly speed runs in the future is all that one mindset I favor over everything in gaming. I always strive to be better and better at the games, and whenever I do make it there as the best in the game one day, you bet your second ass in your alt account that I will hit that new game button and go for another ride again. It's been like that ever since 2015, and it will always be like that till the end of time.